Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
The counsellor I got, she was amazing lady who really cared. But she was under so much stress herself because she was coping with like 2,500 coppers and staff and support staff who were in varying degrees of crisis.
If you go into a construction site, you're going to go, here's the boots, here's the high-vis jacket, here's the helmet, here's the foreman's office, here's the first aid kit. They never go, as a member of the construction industry, the biggest threat to yourself is actually yourself.
People have talked about the scene where Martin screams in the car. Oh my God, I still do that. You know, it's cathartic in some ways, but it's like, it's that scene, I think, is something that a lot of people can relate to.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday. Hey all, Mick here. Just a quick word from me ahead of this week's podcast, episode 250 of Mental Health Monday. Thank you to everybody who supported the programme since we started back in 2017. Former producers, John Fogarty and Lizzie Doyle, of course. Now, this week's programme was recorded at the Liverpool City Region's Mental Health and Work Summit at the Arena and Convention Centre. Thank you to everybody who came down on the day. Thanks to Jake Mills, who was the day's host as well, organised as well by the Metro Mayor of the Liverpool City Region, Steve Rotherham. A special thank you to all those delegates, people who came down and were audience members for episode 250 of Mental Health Monday. Now, this was recorded in front of a live audience. You'll notice in some parts the sound isn't quite what we'd normally be doing on Mental Health Monday, but give us a bit of a break because it was recorded through the PA system that was running through the room at the time, which just goes to show if you want the full effect of Mental Health Monday, next time we do a live show, do come down and see us. I've got a great guest for you. Thanks once again. This is episode 250.
Okay, we're the home of the UK's conversation about mental health. Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle and we are here in Liverpool at the Arena and Convention Centre for a very special day at the Mental Health Summit, organised by the Liverpool City Region, to talk with a brilliant guest who I'll introduce in just a few moments' time. But we're here also to mark the 250th episode of Mental Health Monday. Thank you to our live audience. Really appreciate you being here today. Hopefully we're going to have a fascinating conversation. You're going to flavour of what the podcast is about. And don't forget, all previous episodes of Mental Health Monday are available wherever you get your podcasts, and they're free and able to download right now. Our 250th guest is someone I've known for a number of years, and he started out as a guy who was a cabbie, and he used to be a copper, and he liked to do a little bit of writing on the side, and we'd get talking about all kinds of various different things on the radio program that I was involved in at the time, and he seemed to have something about him. There was something about this guy that looked like potentially maybe he might be going somewhere. And then maybe 2-3 years ago, he said, I'm having a conversation with some people who were sort of involved in TV production. And I was like, what, actual people? And he said, real people. I think they were even in a different country, or he had to go to London or somewhere fancy like that. Now, next time he came on the show, you know that thing I was talking to you about? It's actually, the BBC are going to do it. And I said, what, on the telly? He said, Martin Freeman is going to be in it. And I said, Bilbo Baggins? Next thing you know, The Responder is a huge international hit. The writer and creator is Tony Schumacher and is our special guest on the programme today.
You talk about Bilbo Baggins. I had a meeting. I'd written this thing, and I wasn't a taxi driver when I did it, Mick. If you recall, I was working at the tip in McGull, the council tip, and they rang me up and said, "Do you want to come for this meeting? Martin wants to meet you. He's read your script, you know." Yeah, all right, yeah. So I got on the train and I went all the way to London, and I swear to God, from Crewe all the way to Euston, I was thinking, "Don't call him Tim from the office." Don't call him Tim from the office, right? And I went into the room where he was sitting, and I went, "All right, Tim." And we still laugh about it now. Well, I do.
One of the things that struck me about The Responder was that when I knew you used to be a copper on the beat in Liverpool, and that was going to be the sort of the hook for the show, if you like, I was unaware of how front and centre you were going to put the lead characters mental health, but of course with echoes of your own journey as well. There must have been a point for you where you thought, okay, I'm going to tell this story and I'm not going to hide away from the mental health of my lead character. I'm actually going to put that right at the forefront of what this guy's going through.
I wanted to do something. It's funny, really, because I had a breakdown when I was a cop. That's why I left the police. I've been in the police for like 11, 12 years, and it wore me away. It just, like, emotionally destroyed me, mentally destroyed me. But I never used to tell people. I was homeless for 2 months, and I'd never tell anyone. It was my secret kind of thing of how ill I was, and I wouldn't tell people. It was like I was ashamed. I was like this guy who's always been the one. Like, my dad died when I was young, and I was like the youngest kid, but I was the one who organised the funeral. I was the one who did the running around for the wake and all this kind of stuff. So I was always the one who organised. And then when I was a copper, I was always the one who'd walk into the room and go, you got to find out in the next 55 minutes that I can talk a lot, you know. So I'd walk into a room and I'd feel like, oh, I'll take control of this. I'll be the one in charge. And it's like, when you're suddenly not capable of being the one in charge, it's embarrassing. And that was me. So I was living in my car with my dog, and it was grim, and I wouldn't talk to people about it. Then as time went on, and I started being a writer, and I started opening up about this thing. It took me years. It took me about 7 years. I started opening up about it. I felt better for talking about it, for getting it out there. And the opportunity to make a television show with Tim from The Office, it was just the perfect opportunity for me to say, let's make it about this. Talk about it, get it out there.
And in terms of that, the lead character's story, Tim from The Office, he's in therapy right from the off. So we're not going to explore someone's sort of descent into difficulties. We're plunged, aren't we, right at the start of, this is a guy who's got issues. We're going to explore what those issues are, and also we're going to follow that journey through the therapy as is laid out through presumably his police force or his union back in the day.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of loosely based on me. There was an amazing lady at Merseyside Police who was our counsellor. They're very careful, or they were then, I don't know if they still are now, but they were very careful to not call it therapy, it was counselling. And I, prevaricated for about 18 months about whether or not to ask for help. Because again, it's this embarrassing, I'm embarrassed, And in the police at that time, and I can only speak about that time, having, as we would call it then, cracking up, it was almost seen as a ticket out of work in the streets. It was almost seen as a bonus, Oh, he's gone mad, it's great. He's got off the streets. And you saw it as the thing. So much so that the occupational health units, I don't know if it still is, but it used to be on Mather Avenue in Allerton, just outside the city centre. And we used to call it Mather Avenue. Because you thought it's brilliant, isn't it? I'm going to Mather Avenue, brilliant. You might get a few weeks off work in the streets. And now I look back at it and go, that's all because we were just scared to talk about it. And none of us would talk about it. So the counsellor I got, she was amazing, who really, really, really cared. But she was under so much stress herself. Because she was coping with 2,500 coppers and staff and support staff who were in varying degrees of crisis. And that must have been impossible on her own.
In terms of your own sort of story, have you sort of pinpointed that moment where your mental health became a problem? In the first episode, for instance, of the program, you kind of see the sort of bombarding that the responder has to deal with, and it's one thing, then it's back to the first thing again, and it's back to the first thing by the end of the night. Was that just compounding what you were already going through, or was that one of the factors?
That was one of the factors, but it's for me in the show, the very, very first opening scene of the show was where Chris, Martin's character, looks at the camera and says, I just want to be normal. And that was how I felt for about the last 2.5, 3 years of my career. I just want to be normal. And so the idea was, what we were going to do was just show that it's not always him being under acute pressure. Sometimes it's just the grind. It's like being a pestle and mortar. It's just the grind of appearing normal. It's just the grind of going to a boring job and having to appear engaged with it when you're thinking about the guy who committed suicide an hour ago. It's just that constant grind of it that I wanted to put in. So like it's troughs and peaks for me. That was what we were trying to show with it, you know.
You get these moments as well, sort of within the production of the show, where this sort of like high pitch tone kicks in, and at the moments where the character's obviously really struggling, this sort of tone becomes almost unbearable. It's awkward for the listener as well. I just wondered whether or not you had any influence over that, or if you felt that was a sort of a good way of representing those moments.
I didn't want it, to be honest with you. When we first talked about it, I didn't want it. Because obviously you're part of the team, you know, I do all the writing and all this kind of stuff, but it's like you're part of the team of execs and producers who have ideas and input, you know, and make the show better. And initially I didn't want that sound, because I knew that Martin was going to be that good that we wouldn't need it. But with hindsight now, I look back on it and I go, it was unsettling for people. There was some people who come on and said, listen, I've got, you know, tinnitus, like, and it really messed me up, and I regret that. But we probably should let him on, there was something on it. But I think it unsettled people, and there is that thing about when you're in moments of crisis, and we've all been in them. I'm in one now. Do you know what I mean? When you're in that moment of crisis, you have that thing about where you feel like someone's like driving a pick into your head, and it crowds your thoughts. It's like it pushes out the reason, and it pushes out the thing, especially when a panic hits that. So I wanted to show that in some way, and when they come up with the idea of the show, I think it worked. Did it work?
I'll tell you why I think it worked, was because I think, you know, we're in a room full of people who sort of know about mental health and talk about mental health. But I think there's still a lot of people out in the wider community, you know, millions of people watching your show, who don't necessarily recognize, maybe didn't think this is a show about mental health. Yeah. But actually, when they saw that moment, I felt maybe they'd have gone, oh yeah, this is awkward. This is too much. This is getting too much. And I think one of the conversations around mental health in the workplace, mental health at home, is so much based around language. And actually, we've all grown up in a world where we've not had those conversations about mental health and what it means. Instead, the conversations we've had are the loony bin and Madder Avenue. Those are the things that we've all learned growing up. And I think one of the great sort of challenges for the generation now, who I believe are massive groundbreakers in terms of the mental health conversation, is about resetting the language and resetting people's abilities to talk about mental health and their sense of well-being and their sense of hope or their sense of sadness or loss or grief or whatever it is, rather than that thing of, he just can't cope. Yeah. He's struggling him a bit. I think those conversations are absolutely crucial. And I think if we presume that everybody's already there and is already having the conversations, we'll leave people behind. And I think that's the real danger.
I totally agree with you. I think I said it to you with Jake before. There's the thing about, I can absolutely guarantee that I've tweeted about this today and somebody will have said, another thing about mental health again. Here we go, mental health. But you wouldn't say that if someone had a broken leg. You wouldn't say it if someone had dislocated the thumb. And we need to look at mental health in the same way as we'd look upon a physical impairment like that. We need to say, you know, it needs to be part of it. Oh, you broke your leg. We need to be able to say, no, you know, you've had a breakdown. But we need to say, you know, I'm not, because if people start talking about it, you know, all I can say is like 15, 20 years ago, I started admitting I had a big nose, right? And now I'm cool with it. Do you know what I mean? Because I started talking about it. And like, I think we all started talking about it. This is why I'm happy to talk about my mental health. Because I've got past that barrier, you know. Jake's charity, the stigma, is, you know what I mean? It's all about that. It's beating that. It's getting past the stigma, moving past it, and talking about it. I think it's so important. And that's why one of the things that we really lean into it in the show, you know, get it out there, get talking about it. People have talked about the scene where Martin screams in the car. Oh my God, I still do that. You know, it's cathartic in some ways. But it's like, it's that scene, I think, is something that a lot of people can relate to. Either wanting to scream in a car or screaming in the car. And that was one of the reasons why we put that in, because we thought it's something that will resonate. That's me, that I do that.
I think it's a huge point about that wider conversation, and we're here at the Mental Health and Work Summit, so, you know, let's have the conversation. You know, if you go into a construction site, you're going to go, here's the boots, here's the high-vis jacket, here's the helmet, here's the foreman's office, here's the first aid kit. They never go, as a member of the construction industry, the biggest threat to yourself is actually yourself. You're more likely to die by suicide as a member of the construction industry than any other workplace in the country. But you wouldn't be allowed on that work site if you weren't wearing the boots, you didn't have the jacket, and someone would shout you out. You can't come here dressed like that, mate. Yeah. You can't come in. That conversation around the mental health, and people think, well, you'll never get it to that point. We need to be at that point where we need to be saying, how are you? How have you been today? What are your marks out of 10? Well, actually, you've scored lower than 5 for the last 3 or 4 weeks now, so we're going to have a conversation around X, Y, or Z. We can put those things in place if we want to.
There's a brilliant thing someone said to me a couple of weeks ago, funny enough, a construction thing. We've got some guys who do some work in our house at the moment. And one of them, we were talking about this because he'd seen the show. We were talking about it, and he said his mate always says, I'm not feeling great. He doesn't say, how are you? And he said, what's brilliant about it is, he said, we're sitting in the pub, and Barry, for the sake, I don't know the guy's name, but Barry will say, oh, it's terrible this week, I'm just so fed up, I feel terrible, yada, yada, yada. And he said, and you'll find that other people start going, do you know what, I've been the same. I haven't seen anyone for 4 days. I've been sitting in the house all week on my own. Whatever, sitting in my bed, sitting all week on my own. And that's like, having these conversations is finding new ways to address the issue between. So on building sites, it's incredibly hard. I haven't worked on building sites. I've worked on demolition and roofing. Not at the same time. Well, if you spoke to my old boss, maybe, possibly, I don't know, but I've worked on that. And it's like, it's full of roughy-softy fellas who would sooner fall off the roof than say they felt like jumping off the roof. And it's like, we need to get to a point where they're cool with it. That's why it was so refreshing with Phil, the builder who's working at ours. He was like, yeah, this is my, we all have this conversation about it. We all watch his show. Didn't give me discount, but we all watch, and we all talked about it afterwards. That's brilliant.
Oh, I think it's brilliant, and I think that idea that the conversation's taking place. Sometimes there's this phrase, and you guys will have heard this phrase, of difficult to reach parts of the community. Difficult to reach. And I always think difficult to reach or can't be bothered to reach. Because, if you want to go and find middle-aged blokes in their 50s to talk about mental health, you can go and find them. And you can do it on building sites, so you can do it down the footy, you can find them down the pub. You can create events and workshops and dad sheds and all of those things to find those people. But sometimes we write people off, don't we, as, well, you won't want to talk. It's too hard to reach those sort of people. So we'll just have to accept the suicide numbers and we'll accept the problems that it brings at work because yada, 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 it's too hard to do otherwise. But actually, and the people in the room will testify to this, if you want to find those people, go and get them. If you've got the funding to find those people, you can find those people. If workplaces are empowered to find those people and support those people within the workplace, they will do so because they're a core part of what any business or community looks like.
It costs a fortune, people being off sick. I mean, that's why we've got health and safety. It costs a fortune for people to be off sick. I mean, it's just that simple. When I was a copper, and, I'd go off sick with stress for 3 months, which I did. How much did that cost them? Why not invest some of that money into keeping dirty bobbies working? And that's what it astonishes me. And it's great to see this conversation. It's great to see some of the brilliant companies that are downstairs here, and doing stuff. It's brilliant to see that. But it's just astonishing me that we don't look upon it as something physical. Maybe that's part of the problem is the name that we give it, mental health. Because it is a physical, debilitating situation.
Can I ask you about, obviously, the sort of story that you're telling from Chris's point of view on screen is a representation of your view from a couple of decades ago. Mm-hmm. But it's quite clear, they put him into counselling, they put him into these therapy sessions, and yet his workload is just as high as it's always been. I think this is one of those sort of, I call it well-being washing, that a workplace will go, well, you're struggling, call this hotline number. Are you struggling? Go to this website. Are you struggling in your own time? Go and visit the Hub of Hope and find a mental health resource close to you. By the way, I want that report on my desk by Monday morning. I'm going to be emailing you on a Sunday night, and I want those responses left, right, and centre. You've got to have that whole approach. That's got to change. But Chris's situation wasn't supported in that environment at all because it was carry on, but maybe this therapy thing might do some work for you. But none of the underlying issues were being tackled at all. And I think that's one of those things as well, where some people go, well, we've got all these things in place. We put Tony in the counselling. We took him down Mather Avenue. What more could we have done? And the answer was probably something else. And I'm hoping you can give us a sense maybe of what should have been, what could it have been? What would that support have looked like potentially for you?
I think one of the problems with the police at that time, and I can only speak about it at that time, was you were seen as being someone who was probably malingering. And what they would do is they would send you to someone who was doing the best that they could do within their qualifications. The best that they could do. You know, her name was Lynn in the show, so I'll call her Lynn now. I would go to see Lynn, and I might have to go when I've just been working nights and go to sleep for 2 hours and then get up and then go and see Lynn and then go home and try and grab another 2 hours sleep and go and back to work again that night. But you would always, Lynn was, you know, and I don't mean to be disparaging because she was doing the best with what she had available, but Lynn was like a garage down the corner. You know, it was like, you know, one of these guys who's got like an oily pit, you know, and just goes in like, and can do your oil and your brakes, like, but when you go in with something like, mate, I can't fix that. I think Lynn was in that situation that she was unable to, she didn't have the tools to fix sophisticated problems. The first time I've ever described myself as sophisticated, but, and I think that the police at that time, what they could have done better was, they could have maybe had a way of passing you up the chain. But obviously, you know, they would say, well, we haven't got the money for that. But again, it goes back to that thing about what's better, having a copper who's out there functioning and doing his job properly, or having Chris out there who's on a hair trigger, who is breaking down crying, which is where I was, who can't sleep, who sits in his car screaming and driving around all night because he can't face going home. You know, so that there's like, for me, there should have been someone to pass it up the chain, and also an attitude that was probably more supportive than, oh, he just wants to do what's off, you know. And it's difficult as well because I feel for HR. I desperately do. It must be incredibly difficult because there will be malingering. There definitely is. Now, how you sit through that, I've no idea. I really feel for them. But you've got to, I think you've got to take every case completely seriously and say, what's the best I can do? And not apply formulas to it. You know this thing about like, oh, you've been off for 3 months and then, you know, you drop into a different series and they say, can I have your money off? You're in, you're not. You know. So we're not saying to you, get well. We're saying, get back here or get skinned. And that's just doom to me, because all you're doing is someone who's struggling with pressure. You're saying, by the way, you're not paying your mortgage. So come back. Oh, all right, yeah, I'll go back and just get someone over the head and then you kick me out. Because that's what that leads to.
In terms of making those connections with employees and members of staff who have to sort of reach out, can you tell us what were those sort of moments for you sort of in life where you were like, oh, this has gone way beyond me just not being able to cope at work for a bit, or this is way beyond a difficult point in my life. This is now a serious issue which needs...
My sergeant saw me crying in the car park. That was the thing for me. My sergeant saw me, I'd finished work, and I come out, and I got in the car, and he was walking out, and he gave me the thumbs up, you know, like see it sign. And as he walked past, he looked at me, and I was obviously giving it the old. And he saw me crying in the car park, and he did a U-turn, and he come back, and he said, what's the matter? And I said, no, I'm sorry. No, what's the matter? I'm sorry. And he said, come sit in the car with me. And the second I sat in the car with him, I snapped. And I just started crying. And that was the thing. And we just sat there. And he didn't know what to do. Got out with Chris, guys. Chris, you know, was a fantastic sergeant. But he's very old school, bottle of scotch in a bottom drawer sergeant, you know. And he didn't know what to do. But he had the humanity about it to just sit there and let me have a good sob. And it wasn't, you know, it was difficult because he was saying, well, what was the job? What did this? What was the one? You know, we were looking for the one job, and I was as well. You know, what's the one job that made me just overbalance? But with me, I always think it's like an old record needle. With me, I think I just got blunter and blunter and blunter and blunter. And then eventually, I just went and started bouncing all over the show.
I think it's I'm going to guess the 4th episode. There's actually a couple of moments where Chris, the lead character, not your sergeant, Chris, the character, Tim, he's sitting in his car and he's waiting. He's not only just waiting to start his shift, but he's waiting to see who comes, and he's also waiting to see what look they give him, almost as a way to sort of how do I start the day today? Do I start the day with the difficulty because my partner's going to be, or I'm going to start the day with my ex sort of co-worker judging me about something, where you become almost hypersensitive to this world around you, that all their eyes are on you because there's a sense that I can't cope and everyone's starting to see the cracks.
I had a panic attack in the Asda, which is the name of my first LP. I think I'm going to call it Panic Attack in the Asda. I got into my dog food at about 4 o'clock in the morning. I was working what we used to call an EP, which was an evening patrol from like 7 till 3, I think it was. And I was driving home, I'd locked off late, and I was driving home. Oh God, I need dog food, you know. So I goes into the Asda, and it was deserted except for guys and ladies emptying pallets of food, you know, like they're all in the aisle. You're picking your way through these things, like looking for them. I bought a bag of donuts, and, you know, because that'll help me sleep. And I'd go and get some dog food. And I was walking through the Asda, and I thought everyone was looking at me. It was the weirdest thing in the world. It felt like I'm sitting there now, it's kind of weird because everyone was looking at me. But it was the weirdest thing in the world. I felt like, and what it was people were looking at me, and I started thinking, I must look different because I feel different. And I knew I was hitting that upper level where I wasn't able to hide it. And I was walking out with a bag of dog food, and I felt it happening. I could feel it was like everything in me was similar, and I won't go use no more of a panic attacks than me. But I was on it, you know. And my biggest fear wasn't a panic attack. It wasn't doing myself harm. It wasn't, you know, running out in front of a car. It wasn't anything. It was just looking different in that second. Am I going to cry? Am I sweating? Am I turning bright red and my hands shaking? That was my big fear. And it was the fatal thing about the more I thought about it, the worse it was getting. It was building. But that's Chris. It's like, I got to a point where I was having to take a run up to do trivial things. Pay a check in a bank. I'll have to take a run up to that because somebody might engage me in conversation and I might not be able to do it. Speak to my wife, my then wife. I'll have to take a run up to that. And kind of hours work. And I'd run through what I was going to say a couple of times so that I didn't croak on a certain word and then go. It's like walking over like a rickety bridge in Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know, I'd have to pick the planks that I could stand up on and pray to God I didn't step on one that's not. Because if it did, I was gone.
I always think it's amazing. Thanks for being so honest about that. I think it's absolutely fantastic that you're able to talk about it. And I think so many people will relate to it. And the thing that always strikes me when we talk about mental health figures, we're always talking about the people who've got through to the services or the people who've died by suicide. They're the numbers that come up. But actually, the people who are living their life in that way, there will be other people who have variations of that, whose lives are blighted by whatever that particular issue might be, or the stress or the anxiety or difficulties at home life and work life, which are combined to create this unbearable situation. But there are people out there, they might be in this room, they might be outside, they'll certainly be right across the Liverpool City region, who aren't on those lists, but who are having that experience in the Asda, in the bank, talking to their family at home.
You know what, I guarantee you've looked in your mirror at the driver behind you and they're in crisis. I absolutely guarantee it, and I can guarantee you've done it when it's been a copper. You know the thing when you pull up at a set of traffic lights and you think, oh God, I feel like I've done something, you know. There's a real chance that person in the car behind you, that busy in the car behind you, is absolutely terrified at that moment. Is absolutely. There was times when I'd be out. I'm kind of a confident guy, like, you know, and I was definitely when I was doing the job. But there were times when I'd be terrified that a member of the public was going to ask me a question. Oh God, please don't ask me a question. She needs the any toilets found in. Oh no! Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? It's like don't talk to me, you know. And it's like it's the weirdest thing. I used to do comedy with Jake, and I'd go and do a gig. I do stand-up comedy. Well, Jake did comedy, I did something else. But I'd go to a gig, and I'd been like dealing all day with something like horrible, and I couldn't in the green room. We'd all be sitting there and talk. I'd be just absolutely sick of worry. Sick that I was going to start crying on stage, sick that it's going to happen. And I used to think, like, it would either be the best thing for my career or the worst thing. You know, like, I'd go viral being this comedian who went mad on stage and started crying. That's what it, you know, and that's how I felt constantly. It's liberating, by the way. You said thanks for talking about it. I find it liberating talking about it now. When the show come out, because we never expected the show to be as big as it was, We thought it was going to be this little thing on BBC Two. The BBC One got it, and then it went nuts, and it's all around the world. And I'm sitting here talking to you, looking at the music. And it's like, I never expected that. And I watched the first episode at home, then the second episode I was in London. And I was staying in a hotel in London, and my social media had just gone nuts. People tweeting, messaging and all this. And I went out for a walk down Notting Hill, and I felt like I was going to go. I felt like Chris did. It was the weirdest thing, because I felt like I'd opened my head and the whole world was looking in my head, because I'd done a ton of interviews, a ton of media, all about Chris. Keep pointing to, he's not there, but all about Chris. And it was the weirdest thing. And the next morning I went into the office with Toby, who's the script editor who I work with closely. And 20 years ago I wouldn't have said a word. And I walked into the office and I'm like, you know what, Toby, I think my head's battered here. And we took a morning off and went for a walk down Hyde Park and just talked about it. And it was so liberating to feel that whenever I needed to, I could reach the side of the pool and just hold on for a minute. And that's what I want people to feel like. They're never quite stuck in the middle of the pool, and you're only ever that far away from reaching and getting something to hold on to. That's what I think we should be aiming for.
Absolutely. And I think that's the phrase resilience then comes around, isn't it? That you get to the point where if you've sort of studied your own mental health or thought about your mental health or had sort of education around mental health, actually when those moments do come around, you're not protected from them. Those moments will come in the same way that you'll have to deal with grief and you'll have to deal with difficulty. But actually, in that moment, you knew that the thing to do was to let on, have that conversation, knowing that the way away from that moment was the morning off. You know,
Totally, yeah.
And I guess, and that's the other thing. And those moments were. I know you had a moment when you came back to the city and you went for a walk around the park where you had something similar kind of happen to you.
I come back. I told Mick this the other day. We were on the phone on Wednesday. I got back from London, and it had been the weirdest week of my life. We get phone calls from all around the world to talk about the show and stuff, and it was just so intense. And I'd done a big interview with the Sunday Mirror on, I think, Thursday night. I'd sitting in my hotel room talking about, because I tried to commit suicide, I tried to commit suicide, and I'd gone into that for the first time ever. I'd gradually opened up, you know, and eventually ended up like Thunderbird 2, just everything was all over the place. And I got home and I said to my wife, I was on the train coming back to Liverpool, and I rang Anna, my wife, and said, listen, my head's battered here, can we go for a walk afterwards around the park, you know? She said, okay. So I got into Lime Street and she picked me up, and we had the dog and the baby in the car, the 8-month-old baby, which is why my eyes look like this. And we got to Coldstones, and we got out, and I was talking to her about it. We have a great relationship, we talk about sort of stuff. And she was saying, just take it easy, just don't, you know, you're home now and everything's going to be all right. You've got the weekend, you go back to London, you'll be all right. Yeah, you're right. And we got out the car, and we'd not even got out the car park at Coldstone. And this guy's walking towards us with his dog and his wife and his baby in a pushchair. And I see him talking to the wife. Now, I've done loads of media that week. I've done like ICD news, I've done breakfast, telly and all this kind of stuff. And he saw me and he come walking towards me and he went, hey mate, some show that, you know, nearly made up, you're talking about those issues and everything like that. And I went, oh, drama, yeah, great, yeah, you know. And he got off and I said to him, I can't handle this. I can't handle it. I don't want to be, I've never wanted to be famous. I don't want to be famous. I feel real sudden, acute, like, pressure to, like, give a bit of myself to everyone, you know. And she's gone, behave yourself. Keep walking. She said, like, all you've got to do is just take it one step at a time. She gave me a big talk. She said, listen, it's never going to happen again. You'll be all right. I said, all right. Carry on walking. And I swear we haven't gotten into this room. And I see this family walking towards us. And the fella's talking to his missus. And he's talking. And I'm like, oh no, it's going to happen again. I said to her, it's going to happen again. And she's got hold of my hand. She's saying, you'll be all right, you'll be all right. I started going a little bit. And the guy, true enough, comes towards me. And he walks up, and I turn around and give him a big new sweet smile, you know, all right, mate. And he went, all right, mate, what breed of dog is that? And it was exactly what I needed. He's a Weimaraner, by the way.
You mentioned, you know, thoughts of suicide. You know, when we talk about, you know, difficult to reach, you know, men in a room, having that conversation with men, with women, with everyone, is one of those great taboos, isn't it? That this country's never been able to get its head around. Yeah. That in our life, virtually all of us will have at some point either suicide ideation, we'll think about suicide, that our brains will throw up suicide as an option in a situation. And some indeed will attempt suicide and some will die by suicide. To me, it's an absolute national tragedy that those 5,000 names that we see on an annual basis are often accepted because, oh, it's good news. 350 fewer people died by suicide. Well, it's great that less people die by suicide. 5,000 people or 4,635 people is too many people dying by suicide. And it's again an experience. I mentioned it before. It's an experience which is happening in people's lives right now. Like there are people now, as we speak, thinking, and there are people probably during the time that we speak, while someone will have died by suicide somewhere in the country. To me, it's a national scandal that there isn't, this like beacon that goes off every 5 minutes saying, if you feel like this, you don't have to feel like this. This idea that I once heard the phrase, it was Clark Carlisle, who's a brilliant advocate for mental health. He used the phrase, he said, don't think about it as I can't go on living. Think I can't go on living like this, because the like this is the bit you can change. But so many people will have that thought where you go, I can't go on like this. You were kind enough to say that that was something that you'd experienced yourself.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. I mean, to go back to being a copper, dealing with suicide is like probably the second worst thing that you have to deal with in the police, and it's always profound. It's just, there's no other way to put it. It's profound that you're dealing with somebody, male or female, adult or child, who has, done this thing. There's no, I don't know terminology to use. It's just a thing. They've done it, and it's happened. And I hope, everyone's okay with me talking about it. I hate to be upsetting anyone about it. It's and it used to affect me terribly. There'd be little things that you'd notice after. You always you'd see people who tidied up, or people who leave notes for relatives. As in don't come in and stuff. And it still affects me now. To be honest with you, it's still I look back, I can deal with it differently now. But or better now, but it still profoundly affects me now. But the moment for me was, I remember watching that brilliant Stephen Fry documentary on BBC a few years ago when he wrote out the play, and he come back and he made this documentary, and he said he couldn't go over a bridge without thinking, would that kill me? And I suddenly realised, that's me, that is me, and this is when I was quite well into my, I don't like to call it a crisis moment, that period of my life. I was quite into that period. And I do remember thinking, wow, what profound. Hang on, somebody else does that. Somebody else goes over the Runcorn Bridge and thinks, I'll probably disappear. And I used to go, I went to one at Shalom Way in St. Helens, which is a car park. It's a multi-storey car park in St. Helens. I remember sitting with the fella on the edge. We were waiting for the negotiators to talk him down. And I was sitting waiting with him. It's ridiculous, isn't it? You're waiting for the negotiator. Just hang on. Someone's coming from Birkenhead, That's 20 minutes. Traffic allowed. And the parents were sitting there. And it was it got to a point in the conversation where he was kind of saying, well, do you know what, mate? I mean, shut up, It was like the parents. And I was saying, that probably would see you off, wouldn't it? And it's mad to even think about it now. But with me, I got to that point, I won't go into details because people swear it, but I got to a point where it was definitely the easier option. Now, for me, I was lonely as well. That was part of it. Your marriage breaks down, you can't talk to people. And you might have friends who are around you, but that's different from being lonely. That's just having people around you. If you can't talk to people, what's the point? You can talk on a level that's purely platitude or about the footy or something. That's great. If that's all you've got, it's better than not. But if you can't open up and talk, God, you may as well be living in an igloo, You can't, you're just doomed. You can't communicate. And that moment watching Stephen Fry was like, I'm not the only person to think like this. You know, and that was something amazing for me. I've got your question though, because I would say that wormhole thinking about that Stephen Fry documentary.
No, I think it's. I remember once when I was.
You forgot the question as well.
No, I had a really difficult time when I was just finishing university, and I always had, I was just, you know, when you just. People always go like, people talk about their mental. I'm going to go over time here. When people talk about like their mental health, they often talk about feelings of sadness or feelings of loss or depression. And I was aware of that conversation. This is like 2000, 2001, something like that. So I was aware of those things, but I had the other thing, which was I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anything at all. Like there was no feeling. So when people go, so I never recognized feeling of suicide because I couldn't, even if that was an idea, I would have thought of it being like, oh, I can't even be bothered even thinking about that. Because nothing would trigger any sort of feeling or emotion in me. But to the point where I would get on the train and I would stand leaning against the cabin, the front cabin, with my head leaning on the front cabin, thinking, if the train crashes now, I'll be the first that goes. And I won't have to think about it, and it'll be a tragic accident, and I'll just be one of the victims, and no one will know how I feel inside. But that absolutely, to me, summarized the difficult situation we have around mental health and having a conversation about mental health in workplaces. Should bring it back to the reason we're here today. In workplaces and with friend groups. Because the brain does a thing that it tricks you into thinking that this is the best course of action. This is the way that things have to be. This is your best option. And these are the things we've got to learn about so that we know when that devil tries to do a deal with you, you can dismiss it and go, you know what, there's actually a slightly better door here that I'd rather step through. But we need to learn that door is there, and we need people to open that door for us. We need to learn, if absolutely necessary, how to kick that door down to get ourselves out of that situation. Because if we don't, we head back to the stats, and the stats just keep racking up.
The stats as well are fake as well, I think, because of terrible term to use, but the stats, it's terrible because what they do is they make you feel that you're not different. You know, when people say, and I say this as well, when there's 500,000 men have killed themselves, and it's terrible. You suddenly go, oh well, I'm not alone. Then I can, you know what I mean? I can do it too. It's not loads of people are doing it. It's all right to do it. It's not like when I was a kid. It's running contrary to everything I've said for the last hour. So forgive me, but when I was a kid, it just wasn't talked about. My cousin, second cousin, did it. Ronnie killed himself in the 70s, and it was like, Ronnie killed himself. Nobody talked about it. And he was like, it's just like, we should all be talking about it. What's wrong with that? You know? But then when I hear the stats being bounced around, I can only think, for me, I'd sort of think, oh, well, right, well, it's all right to do if everyone else is doing it. That's me. I know I'm weird, but that's me, you know.
I think that's right. We
need to couch it in a way which is like, you know.
Jake and I create an event for the episode 100, actually, of Mental Health Monday. 226 school children had died by suicide in the previous year. So we laid out 226 pairs of children's shoes on the steps of St. George's Hall because we were trying to create that thing of what does that look like? Mm. Not what's that number, what's that graph, what's that bar chart, what's that pie chart. What does that actually look like? And I spoke to one of the mums who was going to sort of contribute on the day. And I said, look, the idea is to put shoes out. Shoes represent people. I've got a pair of shoes like that. My son's got a pair of shoes like that. And she said, I'm so pleased she said that. She said, because his shoes, her son who died by suicide, are still by the front door. Oh. She said, and I'll leave them by the front door because I presume that one day he'll come in or he'll be going out and he'll need his shoes. But they represent him in our house. But that put a human representation on what otherwise is a number and a tragedy. And one day in the year, we all look at the numbers and go, well, this is sad. And then 364 days in the year, we get on with our lives and then wait for the next time to come around and go, I wonder why nothing happened to change this in the last year. Because we didn't proactively chase those numbers, go for those people, find them, Get them out of the crisis. Get the people who are heading towards the crisis, put them in a different direction. Get them into our life rooms. Get them finding services on the Hub of Hope. Get in texting shout to 85258 to speak to a volunteer. Yeah. Get in calling Samaritans on 116123. Getting them to call 999 in an absolute emergency, or picking them up and taking them to a GP and having a conversation that gets them on some medication or gets them some social prescription. Because that's the thing we need to do. If there was an emergency, a state of emergency, a pandemic of it, we'd take all those steps and we'd do it all today. If we wanted to do it.
Totally agree. I totally agree. It should, it should be open. It should be talked about. It should be something which is, it shouldn't be ashamed. People should not be ashamed of saying, I have thought about jumping off a roof. I have, and I would never say that you shouldn't feel ashamed. Individuals can feel how they want to feel, and I think they have the right to feel that. But I think the more we talk about it, the less shame will surround that subject. And, if this week saves one life, that's a winner. I mean, literally, that's a winner. We did one. Ideally, we want to save 1,100,000. But let's still get one at least.
Save those lives and improve, of course, the lives of so many millions more. Tony, thank you so much for your time today. Responders getting a second series, right?
I hope so, yeah. No, it is, mate. I'm writing it now, even as we speak. I've literally got my laptop in charge in the green room.
Yeah, excellent. Well, huge congratulations on the success of the show. Thank you for being so honest with us on the panel today, and thank you to everybody at the Mental Health and Work Summit and the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority for inviting Mental Health Monday to be part of today. Thanks to everyone who supported the show for 250 episodes. We'll see you for the next 250, and do check out more episodes of the podcast, which are all available wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.